The Gondia, a species by Milla Simmers also known as Sia the Gondia. Our story starts on a planet within the M81 galaxy called Iden, a planet orbiting a yellow dwarf similar to our Sun. 2 billion years ago, Iden already had simple unicellular life. However, something amazing was about to occur. During an attempt at infection, a virus fused with a photosynthetic bacteria. The two organisms swapped genes with each other until they had become homogenized. They eventually became one organism with a virus, forming a sort of nucleus containing the DNA of the new cell. Later, this new cell absorbed other cells such as the ancestor of its mitochondria, and this cell became more complex. Unlike the eukaryotic cells, it evolved alongside this viral nucleoid cell, only possessed one chromosome and used viral reshuffling for sexual reproduction. It could also trade genes with already existing cells just like a virus can. 1 billion years ago, this viral nucleoid cell had evolved into all of the plants on Iden, while the animals and fungi had evolved from more conventional eukaryotic cells that evolved in parallel. 200 million years ago, a species of weed evolved on Iden. It had evolved the ability to store fatty biofuel called hyperglucose. Hyperglucose was similar to oil, being made up of tightly bound glucose particles. This weed could use this energy to electrically shock herbivorous animals that attempted to eat it. Over time, this plant formed a relationship with an animal called the moufak. In exchange for nectar, the moufak would pollinate the flowers of the plant. While eating nectar from the male and female flowers, the moufak would transfer pollen from the male to the female. However, this relationship eventually got so intimate that the female plant started living inside the moufak. So all it needed to do was eat the nectar and pollen from the male flower, and it would fertilize the female plant inside the moufak's body. Then female flowers growing out of the moufak's body would drop seeds onto the ground, which would grow into more male plants, spreading the plants all over the landscape. Then the next great leap was a male flower evolved its electric attack into a form of biological radio that could call the moufak over when nectar and pollen were ready to be eaten. This used a process of creating electromagnetic waves that resonated through the stem of the plant like an aerial. Eventually, this even developed into a way infected animals could communicate with each other as well, using their female plants as biological radio transmitters and receivers. Then the plant evolved a way of sacrificing some of its cells to become viruses again. These viral cells would insert genes into the moufak, which, among other things, made them allergic to meat by removing all bacteria in the moufak's body and instead handling digestion with digestion cells from the plant, made them all female to reduce genetic diversity and make it harder for the animal to evolve resistant to the plant, making the moufak less aggressive, and a host of other changes to make the moufak a better host for the plant. Over time, this plant jumped to all the terrestrial species on Iden. Each animal had assimilation vines they could use to infect other animals. And over a few million years, all the animals on Iden were assimilated and domesticated by the plant. Predation between species didn't exist, as all the animals had been modified to be herbivores that primarily ate the nectar of the plant. All species got along due to the reduced aggression that the plant imposed on all species it assimilated. This is how Iden became what it is today. This is the story of the domination of Iden by Cerebravinia lactudis. 800,000 years ago there was a species of parahuman called the Gauls. They resembled Homo sapiens with blonde hair and dark olive skin. They had colonized several star systems at this point, and they came to Iden to mine a material called protolithium, a mineral only known to occur on Iden that could be used as a room temperature superconductor. The Gauls needed protolithium for their experimental faster-than-light drives. Initially, the Gauls were terrified of the alien environment where all animals were fused with a symbiotic plant and all animals cooperated. They were startled that all the animals had been assimilated by a species of plant that rewrote their biology to such a radical degree. But the protolithium was just too valuable, so they ignored the red flags. They continued colonization under the assumption that human biology was too alien to be threatened by this. Over the centuries, fear died down as nothing happened. People got so comfortable on Iden that they permitted their children to play with the assimilated animals. They would always come home with sores on their arms, but the medical community came to the conclusion that it was harmless. But these sores were the animals' attempts to assimilate the human children. And after around 1,000 years there were cases of success. It initially showed up as a change in the children's behavior and personality after just 24 hours post-infection. They refused to eat any meat. The male children expressed the desire to be female and were distressed that they weren't female. There was also a reduction in aggression, and the children became manic and euphoric. After 3 days, the physical symptoms would start to manifest. Chlorophyll would grow in the hair. Flowers would grow out of the head. Additionally, the children would report the ability to talk to the native animals as well as other infected children on some deep fundamental level. Even from after a week, genetic changes would occur to the child and their skin would become extremely pale and white, and if they were initially male, they would become female. After 2 weeks, the process was complete and none of the original uninfected DNA could be found in the child's body. This would cause Gaul society to panic. The infected children were put in special institutions where they would be studied by medical professionals. However, after months, no cure or vaccine could be found. At this time, the Gauls started calling the infected the Gondia, which is a combination of the Galilean words Gong meaning enemy and Dio meaning plant. However, the children became aware of plans to exterminate the native fauna. And because the children knew the animals became aware through the biological radio connection they shared, the animals then started to attack Gaul settlements and protolithium mines. Eventually, it just became unprofitable to mine protolithium on Iden, especially since the Gauls had designed an FTTL drive that no longer required it. Eventually, Iden became a financially desolate planet as far as Gauls were concerned, and there was a mass exodus from the planet. However, the Gondia stayed and some Gauls chose to become Gondia as they preferred a peaceful life as a Gondia amongst nature. Gondia facts. The Gondia are all female and reproduce through parthenogenesis. The Gondia are 3 times as strong as they would have been as humans. The Gondia live twice as long as they would have as humans. Iden is a hothouse world, so Gondia have trouble tolerating the cold. The Gondia have extremely pale skin to allow light to pass through to the plant fibers under the skin. They also have a chemical in their skin that prevents sun damage. The Gondia cannot eat meat and will get very sick if they try. The Gondia have one of the most advanced immune systems of any species. The Gondia infect people with cerebrivenia lacutis using a retractable vine in seer arm that injects female seeds. The Gondia have an internal body temperature of 40 degrees Celsius and their bodies can function with an internal body temperature up to 46 C, making them very well adapted to hothouse worlds. The human side of a Gondia is only 95% human due to all the genetic editing done by the plant during assimilation. There are many more facts about the Gondia in Seer article on the Project Pandemonium wiki. Over time the Gondia made Seer own society. They used the last of the Gol technology to manipulate genetics and create Seer own biological technology, from biological computers to vehicles to life forms made for the purpose of genetic engineering to create more technology later. The Gondia society was based on equality and anarchist principles. They had no leaders or hierarchy as Seer ability to communicate telepathically made hierarchy unnecessary. They also believed that it doesn't make sense to follow a leader who is just as flawed as the followers of them. For 200,000 years they lived in this state of peace and harmony with Seer environment. They even allowed other parahuman species to visit Iden and they would offer to assimilate these parahumans if they wanted to stay. However, everything changed when a Gondia called Mistral was fooled by the ancient Primordial. The Primordial convinced Mistral that it was a goddess called Terra. Under the alias of Terra, the Primordial fabricated a creation story in which she created all life. She claimed that it was the Gondia's destiny to assimilate the universe and that this was the purpose of Seer existence. This idea spread amongst the Gondia like a mimetic virus, and this monotheistic cult became the defining beliefs of Gondia kind. The cult of Terra is what they called Seer Face, and they invented bioships and FTTL travel and began Seer Crusade to assimilate the universe. Parahuman species after parahuman species fell to the Gondia in Seer never-ending crusade. Eventually, however, they got into a war with a more advanced species. The vampire-like parahuman species called the Vendala. The Vendala were technologically far ahead of the Gondia as their tech was based on ancient Vulbaran technology. But the Gondia had numbers on Seer's side. The war lasted for thousands of years and still goes on to this day. 100,000 years ago, the war with the Vendala spread the Gondia very thin as they were fighting into many places. A group of Gondia who did not believe in Terra and wanted to return to the old ways used this opportunity to escape to the other side of the M81 galaxy. This faction became known as the Neo-Gondia as they sought to return to the Gondia civilization before the cult of Terra. They settled down on a moon called Iris 3 and terraformed it into a new Iden. They kept exploring space but did so peacefully, making friends with other species, both parahuman and alien. They formed alliances with powerful species like the Nuna and other advanced species, hoping that one day they could retake Iden and reform Gondia society back into the peaceful state it once existed in.
Eventually, after rallying the support of other species from the M81 and Milky Way galaxies, the Neo-Gondia put an end to the cult of Terra. Terra was demonstrated to be a false god, and the crusade to assimilate the universe ended. Now assimilation of unwilling people was banned, and the Gondia united under the new United Gondia. And this is the end of the story. If you want to know more about the Gondia, read their document on the Project Pandemonium wiki. We also have a lot of other species, and the project is open for anyone to contribute to this amazing universe together.